Welcome to Wellness Wise Ways. We share practical wellness solutions for a balanced, sustainable life.
This is a summary of Thinking, Fast and Slow, a book by Daniel Kahneman. The topics that Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman addresses are both complex and integral to the human mind. He asks you to think about thinking by considering how your mind habitually contradicts itself, distorts data, and misleads you. His prose is lucid, his reasoning is rigorous, and his honesty is refreshing. More than once, Kahneman illustrates conflicted thinking with examples from his own life. The result is not a fast read, but it's an ultimately rewarding experience that provides lasting illumination. Let's hear takeaway 1. People use two interactive cognitive systems. System 1 works easily and automatically. It makes quick judgments based on familiar patterns. When you have to make sense of something, you think about it. To understand this process, consider a model that says people apply two cognitive systems. System 1 is the mental processing function that reads emotions and handles automatic skills, like driving your car or adding 2 plus 2. System 1 takes over your thinking when you set out to comprehend simple statements, such as complete the phrase bread and, instinctively turn to see where a noise is coming from, or grimace when you see a gruesome image. System 1 supplies associated meanings, including stereotypes, rapidly and involuntarily. Here's takeaway 2. System 2 takes more effort. It requires intense focus and operates methodically. By contrast, you use System 2 when you focus on specific details, like counting or figuring out how to complete your income tax forms. System 2 applies effort consciously, such as when you do complicated math, try new physical activities, or search for a specific person in a crowd. System 2 thinking is slower than System 1 thinking, but you need it for methodical thinking processes, such as formal logic. Human beings tend to value measured System 2 thinking while dismissing the mechanical System 1, but reality is much more complicated. These mental processes engage in a division of labor when it comes to thinking, and they constantly interact. You usually live in System 1's world, where its fast processing is extremely efficient. In fact, you could be engaged in reasoning about a task in System 2, get tired or distracted, and find that you've shifted to System 1 without realizing it. If you've ever puzzled over an optical illusion, you've experienced what happens when these two systems work at cross purposes. Time for the next takeaway. These two systems interact continually, but not always smoothly. Which system you use and how you think depends a lot on the effort you are expending at the time. If you're doing something easy, like strolling on a familiar path, you're using System 1 and have a lot of cognitive capacity left for thinking. If you push your pace to a speed walk, System 2 switches on to maintain your effort. Now try to solve an arithmetic problem, and you're likely to stop walking altogether. Your brain can't handle the additional burden. Recent lab studies show that intense System 2 concentration lowers the body's glucose levels. If you're engaged in System 2 thinking, you're more likely to see people in terms of stereotypes, give in to temptation, or consider issues only superficially. System 1 likes to jump on the straightforward answer. That means if a seemingly correct solution quickly appears when you face a challenge, System 1 will default to that answer and cling to it, even if later information proves it wrong. System 1 performs rapid associative activation. All right, let's move on to takeaway number 4. People like to make simple stories out of complex reality. People tend to seek causes in random events, consider rare incidents likely, and give too much weight to the importance of their experiences. For instance, if you see a pair of two words, or a word and an image, your mind links them, automatically weaving a story from those scraps of information. It also responds to the phenomenon of priming. For example, after you are exposed to the word eat, you are more likely to complete the spelling sequence S-O-blank-P as soup rather than soap. System 1 prefers a linked and meaningful world, so if you are dealing with two discrete facts, it will assume that they are connected. To persuade people, appeal to their System 1 preference for simple, memorable, narrative information. Use a bold font in your reports, try rhyming slogans in your advertising, and give your company a name that is easy to say. These tendencies are markers of System 1's larger function, which is to assemble and maintain your view of the world. System 1 likes consistency. Seeing a car in flames stands out in your mind. If you see a second car on fire at roughly the same spot later on, System 1 will label it the place where cars catch fire. In that way, System 1 seeks to promote cause and effect explanations. When you observe a bit of data, System 1 presumes that you've got the whole story. But this "what you see is all there is," or whiz-y-oddity tendency, colors your judgment in powerful ways. For example, if all the information you have about someone is his or her appearance, your System 1 fills in what you don't know. That's the halo effect. For example, if an athlete is good-looking, you'll assume he or she is also skilled. System 1 is also responsible for anchoring, in which you unconsciously tie your thinking about a topic to recent information you've acquired, even if the two are totally unrelated. For example, mentioning the number 10 and then asking how many African countries belong to the United Nations will produce lower estimates than if you mention the number 65 and ask the same question. System 2 can magnify your mistakes by finding reasons for you to continue believing in the answers and solutions you've already generated. System 2 doesn't dispute information that System 1 presents. Rather, it endorses the way System 1 seeks to categorize your world. Let's move on to the fifth takeaway. The natural tendency to focus on a message's content, not its relevance, affects your ability to make judgments. People seize on vivid examples to shape their fears and future plans. For example, media coverage of dramatic but infrequent events like accidents or disasters, as opposed to dull but common threats like heart attacks and asthma, sets those rare events up as anchors that people use to make wildly inaccurate assessments about what risks pose the most danger to their health. People also reason incorrectly when they don't recognize regression to the mean. That is, over time, everything tends to return to its average position, but people create and apply causal interpretations to what are, in effect, random events. For example, if a baseball player has a strong first year but hits a sophomore slump, sports fans will ascribe his decline to any number of rationales. But in reality, the player was probably just more fortunate in his initial outings than in later ones. Here's takeaway 6. Hindsight bias causes you to distort reality by realigning your memories of events to fit new information. Simplification is at work in the narrative fallacy, the mind's preference for plain, tangible, and cohesive information instead of theoretical, contradictory, and vague information. People derive meaning from stories that emphasize individual characteristics like virtue and skill, but they discount statistical factors and the role of luck. They tend to focus on a few striking events that happened rather than on the countless events that failed to happen. Due to hindsight bias, people distort reality by realigning their memories of past events to jibe with new information. When people tell stories about events they're involved in, they tend to be overly optimistic and predisposed to overvaluing their talents compared to those of other participants. They also will give their knowledge greater weight than it should have. This intense, pervasive optimism is useful for the economy in many ways because entrepreneurs and inventors tend to start new businesses all the time, notwithstanding the overwhelming odds against them. Despite knowing that only roughly a third of enterprises make it to their 5th anniversary, more than 80% of American entrepreneurs rate their ability to beat that statistic as high. Fully a third said their chance of failing was 0. All right, time for another takeaway. Loss aversion and the endowment effect affect how people estimate value and risk and make decisions. System 1 influences how candidly people assess their own intuition and validity. Among other impacts, this means that some experts do not provide great counsel. Expertise relies on an individual's skill, feedback, and practice. For example, firefighters' repeated practice in weighing the risks posed by specific types of fires and their experience in extinguishing those fires give them an impressive ability to read a fire-related situation intuitively and identify crucial patterns. Similarly, an anesthesiologist relies on regular, immediate medical feedback to keep a patient safe during surgery. However, don't put too much trust in experts' judgment in fields where the challenges vary greatly, where luck determines success, or where there is a large gap between action and feedback. Experts who predict stock values or election results often fall into this category. Because System 1 lulls experts with quick answers to difficult questions, their intuition may be flawed, although the average non-expert's System 2 can't detect those inconsistencies. Individuals are especially prone to unclear thinking when they decide about risk and value. Most people are loss-averse. You hate to lose $100 more than you like winning $150. However, experienced financial traders tend to have less of an emotional System 1 type reaction to losses. Individuals also suffer from the endowment effect. When something belongs to you, even for a brief time, you tend to overestimate its value relative to the value of things you don't own. Homeowners exemplify the endowment effect when they overvalue their properties. Let's listen to Takeaway 8. Your two selves appraise your risks and life experiences differently. When you combine these understandings about cognitive biases with the fact that people misjudge how likely rare events are or give rare events too much weight when they make decisions, you have the foundations of the modern insurance industry. The way you frame risk shapes how you evaluate it. If you hear that a life-saving vaccine has a 0.001% risk of permanent disability, your reaction is much different from how you'd respond to hearing that the same treatment leaves 1 of 100,000 individuals forever incapacitated. Yet the two facts are identical. Making good decisions depends on paying attention to where your information comes from, understanding how it is framed, assessing your own confidence about it, and gauging the validity of your data sources. Now for takeaway number 9. Your experiencing self lives your life. Your remembering self evaluates your experiences, draws lessons from them, and decides your future. Just as two systems interact in your mind, two selves clash over the quality of your experiences. The experiencing self is the part of you that lives your life. The remembering self is the part that evaluates your experiences, draws lessons from them, and decides about the future. For the remembering self, happiness is not cumulative, and the final stages of any event play a critical role in recalling its quality. For example, when researchers ask subjects to evaluate the life of someone who lived happily up to age 65, compared to someone who lived happily up to 65 but was only moderately content for another 5 years, the subjects rated the first life as more desirable. Your remembering self's evaluation of your life is one part of how you evaluate whether you are happy. You rate your life by your standards or goals. The moment-to-moment assessments of your experiencing self provide the other side of your happiness. These conclusions may conflict because they account for different aspects of reality. Workplace benefits and the office status that affect general job satisfaction do not shape people's everyday moods at work. Instead, your job's context contributes more to your happiness, including such factors as chatting with coworkers and being free from time pressure. The things you pay attention to have major implications for your mood. Active forms of leisure, like physical activity or time with good friends, satisfy you more than the passive leisure of, for example, watching television. You can't necessarily change your job or your disposition, but you can change what you focus on and how you spend your time. Focus shapes your self-assessments. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is when you are thinking about it. We've reached the 10th and final takeaway. These two contrasting systems and selves disprove economic theories that say people act rationally. Your two selves are intertwined with your two mental systems. While System 2 constructs your remembering self, System 1 accounts for your tendency to weigh experiences by their final moments and to favor long pleasures and short pains. The relationship between your two selves holds philosophical and policy implications because your decisions about which social, health, and economic issues to address, and how, will vary depending on which primary perspective you use, the remembering self or the experiencing self. When you take all these tendencies into account, it is hard to believe any economic theory based on the idea that people are rational actors. In contrast, recognizing how mental systems work can help you realize that economic theory's purely rational beings are fictional. Instead, real people need help making better judgments about their financial and life choices. Understanding how your mind works can help you advocate for policies that account for those issues. The converse is also true. Because no one's mind functions optimally in all instances, rules should protect people from those who would deliberately exploit their weaknesses. Because individuals find it difficult to see glitches that originate in their own System 1 processing, an organization can operate with more methodical rationality than can its separate participants. You were listening to a summary of Thinking, Fast and Slow, a book by Daniel Kahneman. Finally, let's listen to the 10 takeaways one more time. Takeaway 1. People use two interactive cognitive systems. System 1 works easily and automatically. It makes quick judgments based on familiar patterns. Takeaway 2. System 2 takes more effort. It requires intense focus and operates methodically. Takeaway 3. These two systems interact continually, but not always smoothly. Takeaway number 4. People like to make simple stories out of complex reality. Takeaway 5. The natural tendency to focus on a message's content rather than its relevance affects your ability to judge. Takeaway 6. Hindsight bias causes you to distort reality by realigning your memories of events to fit new information. Takeaway 7. Loss aversion and the endowment effect affect how people estimate value and risk and make decisions. Takeaway number 8. Your two selves appraise your risks and life experiences differently. Takeaway 9. Your experiencing self lives your life. Your remembering self evaluates your experiences, draws lessons from them, and decides your future. And the final takeaway, these two contrasting systems and selves disprove economic theories that say people act rationally.
You've been listening to Wellness Wise Ways. Follow us for more inspiring reads and a balanced, mindful life.